Hello and welcome once more to Conscious TV. My name is Iain McNay, and today in the studio I have two guests. I have Erika Uffindell and Nigel Linacre. And I met Erika and Nigel a few weeks ago, and it was a lunch about conscious leadership. And Conscious TV, we get all kinds of ideas coming into us and people sending books and everything else. And in the day, we sit with the ideas, Renata and I, and it's what we're drawn to, what we're interested in, and what we feel is of value. And at the lunch, I particularly liked Erika and Nigel because I felt that they came from consciousness insofar as their leadership is. It wasn't in terms of, I want to be a conscious leader and I'm learning all the right things. I felt there was a depth in how they did their work. And so that's why they're here. I have some books. Sadly, Erika has yet to put her wisdom to a literary form, but Nigel has been very prolific, and I've got 3 of his books here. An introduction to three-dimensional leadership, which is written with his colleague Jefferson Can. And Why Are You Here? Briefly, which is very Conscious TV. And this one, which is very sweet, Recipes for Happiness. And it's not actually about food, although it pretends to be about food, it's about something else. So that's the formal bits out of the way. So Erika, why don't you just tell us what you do in the world in terms of your work at the moment?
Of course. So currently I'm CEO of a transformation business. I've been running that for 25 years, and we work with executive leadership teams to help transform their business, primarily looking at purpose and meaning within business, and also helping them to position themselves in the world. I'm also partner of Pioneer 3 Living Organisations, which is helping organisations to look at the systemic nature of an organisation, and we do that through taking them on retreats away from the normal business environment and really helping them to understand the nature of an organisation as a living organisation, as a living system. And thirdly, I am a director of the Global Institute for Conscious Leadership, where we are actually looking to provide a global resource and create dialogue for executives and leaders to help to imbue conscious business principles and to provide an opportunity for coaches and consultants and other practitioners to share knowledge and to really grow that opportunity to speak to people about this particular topic.
Okay. And Nigel, what do you do in the world?
First, Iain, thanks for having us here. We enable people to become more aware in the moment of themselves and others and of possibilities, and to connect with that. And we say that leadership is about awareness, connection and transformation. We started doing that, Jefferson Can and I, 5 years ago, taking business leaders to Kenya, spending a week in a resource-poor school. And what we developed there, we bring to businesses in different countries and continents. Like Erika, working at a number of levels now, so we started bringing this work into universities so that tomorrow's generation can begin to get this powerful stuff a bit earlier, and that's called Lead Now.
Right.
And out of our work in Kenya has also come a charity that provides sustainable water solutions called Wellboring. In every case, we're actually working to provide awareness that can lead through connection to transformation.
So what do you mean by awareness?
So right now, you're aware of your feet on the floor, the voice in your head or its absence, your breathing, myself here and Erika on my right, the context we can be aware of, the possibilities of what can flow from this time together we can be aware of. And we can also be aware that, of course, we don't have total awareness. We're operating at a lesser level than that. Yet if we can be still enough and just be here, wonderful things tend to emerge.
Yeah, well, I'm actually going to a point I was going to bring up at the end, but I'm going to bring it up now. One of the things that really impressed me when we talked on the phone a few days ago, and you were just sitting at the airport at Heathrow, and you were flying out to, where was it?
Shanghai.
Shanghai, you know, and you just said, I'll put a few notes down and email them to you. And one of the things you said was, I can be still. And I thought, isn't that wonderful? Someone who works in leadership in business says, I can be still. So tell me about how important that is for you, about being still.
Well, I think, truth to tell, I've spent a lot of my life not being still. I've spent a huge amount of it caught up in stuff and excited and sometimes confused and sometimes fearful in the grip of, oh. So there's been a lot of that. There's been a lot of that. And yet it's possible, I believe, for all of us to connect with a stillness, to slow down, to follow our breath, to whatever it is that gets us to a place where we notice, or may notice, amongst other things, that actually everything's fine. Nothing's missing at all. That fear, worry, concern, anxiety we had was only a phantom. Actually, when we're here now and we can breathe, we have everything. And in that space, we can connect more deeply with something more profound than the fleeting shadow of a moment.
And isn't that sometimes hard for people in high-powered, and Erika, if you want to jump in here as well, fine, in high-powered situations where there's a crisis going on, let's take the extremes of Obama and Putin, and they're trying to sort out the Ukraine and Crimea, and you come along, theoretically, and you say to them, well, be still. Isn't that, and that's maybe a very extreme example, I understand.
No, I think it'd be great, and I'd like to, just a quick thought before is, well, we would hope that, and I don't know those guys, but we would hope that Obama and Putin would be able to feel their feet on the floor, to get calm, to get clear, to understand their responsibilities, to feel their connection with humanity, with our respective humanities from their point of view. We'd hope that they would feel that. I know you're right. And certainly I myself have often been, I've been there where it feels like a crisis.
I think you, when you take that moment to put your feet on the ground, you really feel grounded into the earth, and you take that breath. Before you make that decision, there's a clarity that comes. It literally kind of comes up through my body into my head, and at that moment, there's almost a peace and a stillness before you make that decision. It's almost a silent breath.
And you feel that?
I do, and I think often when people are nervous or they are, in a moment of turmoil, sometimes when people are making difficult decisions, I always say to people, just as Nigel says, you feel that groundedness into the earth and take that breath, and as you then come to make that decision, that clarity will come. And for me, moments where I have been very still, as Nigel says, are the moments where I have been most creative. Those moments just come, and they're things that actually you realise were out there. You just couldn't see them in that moment where you are, full of noise and stuff going on in your head. It comes from beyond, kind of in a sense of beyond your being, really. There's moments of vision and inspiration and, to a degree, intuition. I feel, does that?
Yeah, I've always felt for myself, and I should declare that, okay, I have this project with Renata, my wife, Conscious TV, but I'm essentially a businessman a lot of the time, and it's interesting because I've historically found, and I may have spent time agonising over decisions, but in the end, the big decisions always made themselves, and it wasn't me. And people have said to me afterwards, God, that was brilliant what you did, and that actually isn't true. It wasn't particularly brilliant. It was just so clear. It would have been absolutely stupid to make a different decision. And I wonder if that is the same for high-level politicians. It possibly is. That end of the day, it is clear what you do, and you either follow that, have the courage, if you like, to follow that, because it may not be an easy decision, but in one way it's clear it's the right decision.
And I guess, Iain, that's also the difference between coming from the head with knowledge and from the heart with wisdom. So there's a big difference there, and when we talk about conscious leadership, it's about the inner self. So it's connecting with the gut, with the intuition, and coming from that sense of awareness, linking to Nigel's point about experience, really being mindful of everything that's around me. And in that moment when I'm making that decision, it also connects with the implications of that decision. So to me, that is coming from deep within, from a deep wisdom, which also, if you are coming from a place of consciousness, connects with the implications of that action, the interdependence of that decision and that action. What are the implications of that decision for other people? It could be people close to you. It could be people, in your business, in the country that you are working in, in the world, in the universe. There are implications that are rippling out from a decision you make at any one time. So for me, I think that's where that moment you're talking about, the gut, comes through, and that heart comes through rather than just the head. It's the connection of wisdom and knowledge.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've always been interested in the brain, and I did an interview last week with a guy called Iain McGilchrist, who's written a 400,000 word book which is called The Master and His Emissary, and it's about the divided brain, the left and the right hand side of the brain. And in one way I felt a bit out of my depth in the interview, I have to be honest, because he had such a brilliant brain, and he understood the brain so well, and I'd read part of the book but not the whole book. But what I found interesting was that when I was reading the bits of the book that I did read, I was looking at myself, and when he described the left-hand side of the brain and the right-hand side of the brain, the right-hand side being very generally the more creative side, the one that sees the whole picture, the left-hand side being the more narrow-minded, the more so-called logical side, I could see that the important decisions I've made were all, if you like, or decisions that have been made through me, were all inspired by the right-hand side of the brain. And where I'd struggled, and for ages and ages, that was my left-hand side. So in a way, I saw how important the heart is, the symbolic, and the gut is symbolic, but there is something going on in the brain that's very real and tangible and can be measured too, that's palpable. And so I think the more we find out about how the brain works as well, it's so interesting and also important in how we make these important decisions and how we lead too.
I think when we think about leadership as well, that connection with, the last, I guess, 50, 100 years, the leadership, a lot of the leadership training has been perhaps more in the mind. It's been, we've been working in a knowledge system, in a kind of knowledge economy, in a knowledge age, and we have so much knowledge now. But I think where people are shifting now, which is where you connected with us, Iain, in terms of conscious leadership, I mean, I call it the energy age, and other people call it the conscious age. There are many different aspects and ways you can talk about this. But to me, this is where we're connecting more with the sensory, which is what you're talking about, that creative side. And I think that is where leaders now are beginning to feel, and the work that Nigel and I are doing is much more around the feeling and the embodying of values and the business principles, rather than just the knowledge side. And I think it's the balance and the equilibrium. It's not going one way or the other. It's understanding the balance of the left and right brain, the understanding of knowledge and energy, knowledge and sensory, knowledge and wisdom, I think.
I think that's exactly right. In our experience, many of us get stuck in our inner dialogue and don't get beyond that. And the mind lives in the past and the future. It's looking backwards at data, it's imagining into the future. But the body's here now, and the heart is here now. So getting that balance where we can come into the present and be here, and from that place, without the dialogue getting in the way, go into the future in our mind, go into the future in a positive way and imagine what we'd love to have to enable. So much more powerful. So there's something here about balance.
There's also a piece around being aware when you experience those pieces around the fear versus expansion as well. I mean, one of the things that we've learned, I think, over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, particularly with the downturn, with the economic crisis, is that you could see a lot of organisations going into fear, leadership teams going into fear. You know, this wasn't something they'd experienced before, and they felt out of control. And so I think a lot of leaders and teams kind of, you could feel them contracting. You could see the outside world thinking, well, what's going on? Because they were losing money and they were getting into trouble. Some of them, sadly, were going under. And I think what the last couple of years we've begun to see is where organisations have begun to recognise the need for higher purpose, have begun to recognise the need for a conscious leadership approach, conscious business principles, and you can feel expansion happening again. And I think this balance of the knowledge economy and the creative economy coming together, you can feel that shifting now. And the work that we're doing, there are many more organisations and leaders now coming to us to say, actually, I need to understand more about this. I need to understand what you were really talking to there, Iain, the balance of left and right brain.
And yes, exactly. And maybe now there's also an understanding spreading that it's not enough in business. It's essential in business to not lose money. If you lose money in business, you're a businessman as well. That loss has to be funded in some way.
We have no business.
We get
ultimately.
that.
Yeah.
We get that. There's no denial. Business has to make a profit rather than a loss. But simply existing to make a turn, to make some cash, whatever, is now not enough for a growing number of people. It's the necessary, it's the precondition. If you can't run a business in a way that it makes a return, you're out. But that's not satisfying enough for us and for a growing number of people, and especially for the younger generation who believe, as we do, that life can have meaning and purpose. And work is a huge part of life. If we can't find meaning in work, where can we find it?
Absolutely, and I think one of the things that you said in the notes you sent me was you saw work as an extension of your life. It wasn't like, and I have the same in my life really, I don't think of myself as going to work, it's all part of living my life, and there's times when I do get stressed out, admittedly, and I do things that I don't primarily want to do, but that's hopefully a minority of what I'm doing in my work time, and it's just obvious that, especially as you get older, it's not always so easy when you're younger. When you get older, if you're not enjoying your work, that's actually very sad. And I think one has to ask the question, how did you get to that position?
Absolutely. And I mean, at Uffindell, we've always tried to create an environment, I think you've both been to our offices, but we've always tried to create an environment that is very much like home, that when people come to work, I think work's quite a heavy word, funnily enough, always, and I think it's about being able to bring yourself from home into work and just transition and to feel at home, to feel relaxed, to not feel that you are kind of penned in, to have that space for expansion and creativity, particularly in our business. So I've tried to always make sure that the environment is as relaxing, as open and as creative as we can make it, really.
I'd like to spend a few minutes because in a way there's a lot of people talking about this is an ideal way to have a work environment, this is how to lead in business, etc. But with you two guys, you gave me some information about your own journeys, how you got there. And I think that's of value to people to just see how you've got to where you are in terms of the way you live your lives and the way you lead in business. So let's start with you, Erika, because you were I think you were in brand management for a long time, and then you developed a fear of flying, didn't you?
Yes, so about 15 years ago, I was travelling a lot around the world, having to travel for my business to do a lot of presentations and consulting with clients. And about 15 years ago, my son was probably 2, 3, and I suddenly created this extraordinary fear of flying. I'd got on planes all my life. And I was actually in a train going up to Edinburgh. I literally couldn't even fly to Edinburgh. And I was reading a magazine. There was an article about a model who had got over fear of flying. She'd been to see a guru.
So just how did it start then? So you've been flying and you're all okay. Was there one situation that kind of triggered it?
It just came, it just literally began. It wasn't one moment, it wasn't a bad flight. It was literally just a feeling that kind of almost overtook me. And I became more fearful on a flight, and then I became more fearful on the next flight, to the point where I literally just, couldn't get on the next flight. I literally couldn't. In fact, we were going to present, a colleague and I, we were going to present in Chicago to a hotel client of ours, and I actually just said to him, I can't get on the flight with you. You're going to have to do this presentation on your own. But the following month, I had to do with the same client, I had to be in Hawaii, which is, probably a 23-hour flight over water, which seemed at that point to be
You're going to have to get on a plane.
My most terrible fear. And so I was reading this article on the train. It said this Indian guru had helped this particular model to get on a plane. I thought, why not? I didn't know what to expect. I went along. That was the beginning of my journey, I guess, into a greater sense of self-awareness. Some people call that self-inquiry. But I didn't actually really know what was happening when I went there, because it was so subtle. He taught me, I guess at that point I wouldn't even have described it as mindfulness, but it was a sense of experience in one's body. It was experiencing in that moment where the fear was and where I was, I guess, feeling trapped, and where that sense of control was coming from in me. And he helped me through very, very, very subtle, and now I look back, quite sophisticated methods, and taught me through postures, through breathing, through meditation, and got me through creative visualization onto that plane all the way to Hawaii and back. And since then I have continued to fly. I won't say that there aren't moments, clearly, when they arise, but now I'm aware of what that means to me and where that's coming from, and things we were talking about earlier, just literally about grounding and feet. Hard to be grounded on a plane, but grounded in the breath. And that took me on a journey, Iain, of doing a teacher training in yoga and teacher training meditation, and then actually working in energy and energy systems, which then led to an understanding of the chakra system in the human body, which I then translated into an organizational energy system, which wonderfully, and by thank the universe, I connected with three founders of Penia 3 who had also had the same idea. We're looking at the organisation as an energy system.
Yeah, I'm thinking we'll try and show, if you can give me afterwards, because I have it here, but it isn't strong enough to show them at the camera. We'll try and show the how the chart works, because let's just go through it briefly, and maybe Nigel, you have some input. It's very interesting, and I was looking at this again with Renata last night of how, in a way, clever this is. So the bottom line for a business is grounding. Mm-hmm. Then you have well-being. So the grounding is the base chakra. Talk us through it.
Grounding is, of course, your security. For an organisation, it's, am I secure in where we are as an organisation? Do we have enough market share? Are our finances secure? Do we have enough resources in place? So it's all about the fundamentals, the foundational energy of an organisation. And also the leadership, has the leadership been in place for a long time, or has it just left? Have we, as a CEO, just moved on? So that foundational energy is very powerful, of course, and very, very strong. The second chakra is well-being, which, of course, is the emotional well-being of the organisation, including creativity. We were talking about creativity earlier, so that sense of emotional well-being. The third chakra is...
Hang on, let me just be more clear on this. So how does that mean with people who work there? So when you say well-being, it means...
Yeah, so, when you walk into an organisation, that temperature check of how people are feeling in the organisation. So are they connected to the purpose of the organisation we were talking about earlier? Do they have meaning in coming to work? Are they living the values the organisation? Are they feeling good about the future of the organisation? Are they connected with each other in a good sense? So that's the well-being of an organisation. And you can kind of feel that to some degree when you go into an organisation, but of course there's many methods of surveying the well-being of an organisation, including the environment, as we were saying earlier. You know, what is the environment, the physical environment that they're working in?
Yeah.
And the third is willpower, which of course is, you know, our power base. So are we clear about our mission in the organisation? Are we clear where we're directionally heading in an organisation? How are we manifesting our power in good ways? Are we using that in the right way for the greater good? Or are we holding it individually in an independent way rather than interdependent way? And then, of course, the heart centre is we talked about heart-centred leadership earlier, but the heart centre, of course, is about cooperation, how we collaborate, how we cooperate, how we co-create together from a centre of compassion and care in the organisation. And again, of course, one can think about how that manifests in an organisation, particularly through leadership. Do they care? Do they demonstrate they care about their people? Is it a people-centred organisation? And then, of course, we have the communication chakra, the expression of an organisation, how it talks about itself. Does it speak the truth? And of course, at the moment, organisations are going through a lot of reputational issues, ethical issues. So it's a very important chakra at the moment, the communication, the expression chakra for organisations.
And people are almost waiting for the untruths, aren't they? This whole drama we're having with the missing plane at the moment, it's like, what is the real truth? And we all want to know, and the people who are directly affected want to know more than anything else. And it's like people smell something is not right, and they're on their case, aren't they?
Absolutely.
You can't get away with that now, can you?
You know, to speak one's truth and to understand the power of the word is critical in today's business environment. It really is. It's also about dialogue, because organisations have done a lot of tell in the past, and communication in its truest form is dialogue, it's flow, so it's two-way, and that is so important now for organisations. Social media, to be honest, technology has, in a sense, been a catalyst for that, but it is something that is critical now, I think, and we're talking politics earlier. Dialogue through compassion would change the world. Really would, in terms of some of the decisions the politicians are making in today's world. So it's critical. Then wisdom, through our third eye, through our intuition, is critical in terms of strategic direction. Do we have the right strategy in place for the organisation to grow and to expand? And do our people all understand the strategy and where we're headed? And then, of course, the crown chakra, our sense of community, our sense of global consciousness. Are we thinking of us as an individual organisation, or as an organisation as part of a community, as part of a global community, as part of a universal community? And so each one of those energy centres in an organisation can get blocked. It can be very healthy and flowing. And of course, for us, the work we do with leaders is to do a diagnostic piece with them about where those centres are at the moment for them as an organisation. Of course, they can change at any one time, where they're blocked, where they're clear and flowing, and then we focus and prioritise on those areas that are blocked, and to help that energy then begin to flow. And ultimately, of course, as in within a human system, the energy will flow and become a high-performing system, therefore a high-performing organisation.
And there's often this sense, I don't know whether you come across this with your clients, that somehow we have to choose between these things, as though we can have a focus on the nuts and bolts, or we can have a focus somewhere else. But as you say, actually, they're ands, and they reinforce and support one another. So it's not a false dichotomy. It's not about where does our focus have to be, does it have to be stuck on one thing?
It's always interconnected,
Exactly.
and every piece connects with another, as in a human body. You know, there's a flow of energy, isn't there? And that, you know, in a human body, we can become sick in a particular area, going back to awareness and mindfulness, and you can feel that block, can't you? It's actually the same in an organisation.
They can get sick too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think leaders know to be honest. They know where they're sick.
Yeah.
They just need help sometimes in reminding themselves of that and knowing what to do with it.
There was this film, I don't know if either of you saw it, that came out a few years ago called The Corporation. And it was a documentary that somebody made. And it was a reasonable budget, it wasn't a cheapo one. And it was about the psychology of a corporation. But they talk about mainly big corporations. And the more they looked at it, the more the conclusion was basically most corporations were paranoid schizophrenic, because so many of these things were just not balanced. I don't think...
Absolutely right, sorry, exactly right. And in our experience as well. And then it gets tough because you want in your organisation to be able to live a truth, but you find it hard to own up to the truth that you're not where you want to be. And yet none of us really are, at least not all of the time. No organisation is perfect, no leader is perfect. And somehow I think we have to get to spaces where we can admit and own up to the work's not done. It's not complete. It's not ideal. Nothing is perfect here in this place, and we're okay with that, rather than, which we sometimes come across, and it's well-intentioned, but everything's fine here, it's okay. The organisation works even when we know that it doesn't really, or at least many people in different levels of the organisation know, but the organisation doesn't seem to want to admit that it's sick to some extent. As we could say, we all are sick to some extent. We're not perfect.
It's so interesting, knows that, because there's a saying that the organisation can only ever be as conscious as its leader. And actually, sometimes when you do go into organisations, there are people, sometimes within the organisation, perhaps further down in the leadership team, that do feel this, either intuitively because they're experiencing it every day. And it's actually just the leaders are slightly disconnected and out of touch with what is actually happening within the organisation, within the body. And so that is really where you just get this block sometimes between what is the reality and what is happening and what people are feeling, and your point about leaders saying, no, everything's fine here. Partly that's a journey they have to go on, and partly, as you say, it's just an evolution of an organisation. It's not ready yet to go on that journey, and consciousness is a journey. We will never say, I am conscious, to your point at the very beginning. We're learning every day. I learn from my people every day, the people I work with, share businesses with, and that is a journey you will go on. It's not about perfection. It's about a sense of growing awareness. And I think leadership is that. Leadership isn't a science or an art. It is a sense of consciousness. It is a spirit of consciousness.
Well, one of the things I also liked about this chart, the grounding, for me, is very much related to the embodiment as human beings, and we find that more and more on Conscious TV. Renata and I are drawn to this subject of embodiment because we've had many people have many great experiences, have a lot of wisdom, but it seems the challenge is to embody that in the human adventure. So the grounding for me is a lot to do with embodiment, and the community, the higher level, of course, it's the interconnectedness, and of course in business it is a competitive world a lot of the time, but stakes are so high now we don't realise that cooperation is so essential. We're not going to have much of a planet for us to operate our businesses on. So those two are so important, and we can almost directly relate to those as spiritual journeys somehow insofar as it's about, we talk about awakeness or enlightenment or realisation, is about the realisation of who you really are, which is you are not ultimately just a separate individual. On the other hand, it's no good just hanging out there and not embodying that in your human life, because again, you're still lost. It's interesting that you chose those two, or those two developed.
Yeah, and the embodiment piece to us is very important. I mean, it's critical. I think a lot of money, time and energy in organisations has been spent in talking about engagement, training people, putting posters on walls. These are our values. But unless people feel those values, unless they have a sense of what it means to be and connect with and experience those values and really feel that value, they really haven't actually probably moved and transformed in the way that the organisations hoped those values would actually help to transform the people and the organisation. So I think for me, embodiment is now really critical to take the next shift in organisation consciousness. I don't know what you feel about that.
You again, you said, Nigel, the notes you gave me was something else marvellous, which I want to read out. Which maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background, how you got to where you are. But what I really liked was where you said several things. You said, I practice self-awareness. I can be still, we talked about. I practice gratitude and explore consciousness. I pray. And the last two lines were, seek and you shall find. Find yourself and you find everything. Find yourself and you find everybody else.
Easy words.
But no, but I felt these were real.
Yes.
So how did you get to this point?
Well, I think we can pick up when I was when I was 19 years old. I remember walking onto the university campus. I'd scraped into a university somehow. And I walked on campus and I had this awareness, this Damascene moment that I didn't know who I was or what I was about or why I was there in university. Or indeed in why I existed, why I'd come to exist. I had no idea. And I thought it was interesting that I had no idea. What is this about? And that kicked off a journey which we can track, if you like, at a spiritual level, at a psychological level, at a physical level, at a political level. And I studied the big thoughts, the big philosophical ideas, spiritual traditions of different kinds, psychology. I got involved in politics a bit, in a fringe sort of way. I was thinking about how can I make a difference? What would a good life look like? How do you enable change? Is it a personal thing? Can change happen only with people changing in the ways you've been describing? How does it happen in a society? What does this look like? And really, I was fairly clueless, but beginning on some kind of a journey. I went into a commercial career. It was interesting. I learnt about that, about how you provide a service, how you satisfy a client, how you make some money, that sort of stuff. It was a career in advertising to start with. It seemed fun at the time, and it was. And then I started hiring and training and explaining stuff and writing some stuff. And I got some good feedback on that. And I thought, that's interesting. I can enable somebody to get something. And then I really felt something, a real response. And I thought, let's go with this. Started training, moved out of the corporate world, and then into coaching, and then into leadership development, which seemed more powerful. And I had this idea to take people to Kenya, where I'd done some work. Jefferson Can and I created this leadership journey there. And I've learned such a huge amount from him. And we've developed an approach to leadership, which, as I mentioned right at the beginning, begins with awareness. This is not original. That enables connection. And that enables transformation. And it's experiential. So it's powerful and real. I love theories. I love extemporizing. I love models and things. And they're helpful. But the emphasis that we have is on, as you were saying, with values. When you get it that actually this is a value that's really important to me and that I really believe in and that maybe I don't yet fully live, that's something. That's more than, okay, the organization believes in this, good, I must do that. The must motivation is different. So it's getting to a deeper and more profound place. So I think our work brings something from deep traditions, but makes it real in a business context. If we can't be true to ourselves in work, when can we be true to ourselves? And picking up what you were saying, Erika, we say that leaders, first and foremost, bring. What does a leader bring? A leader brings her or himself. That's what a leader brings. Now, if that self is not calm, present, aware, connected, understanding purpose and being, then that leader is just like a cork on an ocean, bobbing around and being moved about by the tides. So getting to that purpose, to what you're actually about, and what the organization's about, and then attempting to live that, however imperfectly, changes everything. And we can only help to bring that if people feel that, to an extent anyway, we live that ourselves. Otherwise, we're just bringing the latest, theory, words, ideas, and we like theories, and they're good and they're helpful.
Yeah.
But if you can't walk it, if you can't be it, and I'm so far from perfect, it's not true. I don't fully live my values, not 24/7, not all the time. I'm not always completely calm and present and as aware as I sometimes am. That's a journey. That's working on it.
Yeah.
And I'm not asking anyone else to be perfect, but I'm looking for and hoping that we can be more honest with ourselves and with one another, that we're not there. And in that space, we can let go of the fear, we can stop pretending, I'm fine, I'm perfect, I'm a good leader, I've got it all, I've got this stuff. So stop pretending that stuff. Be more real. Because what we deny just hangs around. And we can be more honest and get there and then fully connect. And in that, I was really struck by a number of things you said, Erika, and particularly this thing that organizations imagine as individuals do, that we have to be separate, that we have to stand alone, that we have to compete, we have to whatever. This is not true. We are in this world. Together.
And leaders often, I think, feel that they have to say, I know. Leaders, I think, have always had to have this sort of sense of, I know the answer, I have the solution, rather than actually accepting that they don't, and being vulnerable to that, and having a sense of being able to be connected to a feeling that they have about vulnerability, and sharing that then, and sharing that vulnerability, and bringing people in to make that decision collectively. And I think that's a journey, which you're talking about there, Nigel, around that awareness and that shift, and recognising all of us, as you absolutely rightly say, are on a journey. And I, like you, always, every day, I learn so much about what I'm not doing. But it's not about beating yourself up. It's just saying, okay, that's a learning process. I got that wrong, or I learned from that. I would see that differently now. I would see that through a different lens. I would do that differently now. And I think that's where leaders need to be open to that and accepting that, and not feeling that they always have to be perfect and have the right answer for everything. I think it's...
And I'm so glad you picked that up too, Erika, built on this, because nowadays it's simply not possible for a leader. It's not possible for a leader of a team to know about everything that goes on, even in that team. It's not possible. It's not possible for someone leading a department with a large... It can't know. A CEO simply cannot know what is happening in the different places. What a leader may be able to do is create a space in which people can be more honest and open, and then that leader has a chance to sense more of what's happening. Because when they can't do that, when there's a sense that they are judging, when there's a sense that people are scared or intimidated by them, then people won't offer that deeper truth, and they will be, as you were mentioning, they'll be cut off. So this ability to be connected with self is fundamental, to connect with another, to connect with the truth of who you are, of who I am, in my frailty, in my humanity, in my sometimes confusion. And then to be more honest about that, more fully honest about that, enables others to be the same. And then we can be truthful instead of basically covering up and lying and pretending, which I have often done.
Yeah, it's interesting because, my business, as I think I said earlier, is basically the music business, and which I work in. And I feel we've lost a lot of the characters in the music business, and even the people that run the multinationals there, they're not bad people at all, but you feel they haven't got the charisma and the kind of, just the flair that people that had that role years ago. It tends to be more lawyers and accountants now, and it isn't all bad, because I was originally an accountant, so I'm not saying that's all bad. But it's as if somehow the character of the leader has been watered down, and it is more seems so often now it's a model, and you've got to try and be the perfect leader. And yet, if you look at the people that are the real kind of stars of the independent leaders, and you know, like the Alan Sugars, I'm not saying he's all right in every way, but him and the Bransons, they are real characters, and you feel they may not be completely clear and coming out for their essence the whole time, but you feel they're their own people in some way. I don't know what you have to do. That's maybe controversial to you guys, what I'm saying.
I think that's an interesting point, Iain, because we were talking the other day about entrepreneurs. Not every business who is an owner is an entrepreneur. You can own a business and not be an entrepreneur. But there is something in that energy of being an entrepreneur, or being having that courage to set up a business, to run a business. That means that you have to break down a lot of that other stuff. You have to bring your whole self. Nigel was talking about presence there and being present. You have to bring your whole self into the being of the organisation. People see you, see your vulnerabilities, see your bad moments and your good moments. I think what happens in a corporation is there is a shell. There is somehow a protective shell around an organisation, and the larger they get, sometimes the harder the shell becomes. And so within that, almost the leader becomes part of that being, which has a shell. She or he becomes part of the process of that organisation, rather than an individual with a truth, with a personality, with his vulnerabilities. And that's really what Nigel was just talking about. So I do think that it's neither the fault of the organisation nor particularly the fault of the leader. It's the alchemy that happens between an individual, a person, a persona, and the corporate, and those two energies, when they come together, they can either come together as a vibrant, charismatic, inspiring energy, or they can come together as a heavy, bureaucratic, soulless sometimes energy. And therein lies the challenge, I think, between the two. And how can we get larger organisations? You know, people often say larger organisations, if they work in smaller teams of 20 or 25, they can retain some of that charismatic, inspirational energy. And it's actually getting organisations to think and be in that way of heart-centred compassion, grace, energy, creativity, that those smaller entrepreneurial, not necessarily smaller, I mean, Virgin is a huge organisation with many, multifaceted organisation, and yet somehow they have managed to keep that energy and continue to. So I think it's being true to that original founding energy.
Yeah, and you've got to have a lot of courage as well, because you've got to be able to take risk, and I guess that's harder if you work for a big corporation, because you're not just risking your own business, you're risking a whole corporation that you don't own. But without that thing of courage, and one of you said, was it you, Erika? I don't know. One of you said at one point in the notes that you gave me that this thing of having courage is important. You're both nodding, so maybe you both said it, or maybe I've got confused.
I think Erika said it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it's always difficult, as you say, when you're in an organisation, a corporate, particularly when you have shareholders. I think it's harder because you become more and more often weighed down by the pressure of the numbers, pressure of the dividend requirements. So that is hard, as you say, to have courage. On the other hand, courage doesn't mean necessarily taking risk as such. I mean, unconscious risk. Courage can be actually looking within and saying, okay, if I go with my gut, that is my truth and my inner wisdom, trusting that. And if you hear noise around you by people saying, no, we shouldn't be doing this, we shouldn't be doing that, it's what we said at the very beginning. Trust that wisdom, trust that intuition, and that's the courage, because it actually is the right decision when it comes from that inner self. It is always that wisdom. It is always going to be right.
It made me think that we often lose track of that when we're when we're trying to do what we think someone else wants. So I'm the CEO and I think that I'm under this huge pressure to make the numbers. And I think that's all the shareholders care about. Well, they're human beings too. I mean, maybe they care about more than the numbers. And if they can be motivated by a more profound purpose than just the numbers, maybe they'll feel good about that. You would think that they would. We sometimes ask the question of people, we say, are you here to make the world that you affect a worse place? Or a better place? Or to make no difference at all? When we all think about it, when we actually make time to think about it, I say we all know that we're here to make a positive difference. We all know that. We know that. It's inarguable. And actually, we don't need leaders who are not interested in making the world that they affect a better place. The world doesn't need them.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Not needed anymore. Not needed. Time has passed. We're all now involved in a collective endeavour to make what we affect, what we touch, better. And as much as we all sign up to that, that's how the world changes.
And it's a different bottom line. It's the triple bottom line. It's people, planet, profit. And that's the leaders we need now.
So it's people. So the first priority is people.
Planet.
So I would have thought the planet would be the first priority.
I don't know if we can separate them in terms of sequence.
Okay.
People,
Humanity
planet, profit.
and planet. It's not
So
one
it's-
is right or wrong.
Okay,
It's,
all right.
it's people, planet, profit.
Okay.
And actually, it's the flow of people, planet, profit. Because,
Okay.
as we were saying earlier, if we don't have successful organisations, profitable organisations, we won't necessarily exist. I mean, we have to be able to have some form of transaction and economies, healthy economies, whatever structure of those economies they are in the future. But of course, we have to have a healthy humanity. Humanity has to be healthy and prosperous. We have to have a healthy planet, and we have to be able to have organisations that can make profit to sustain and to invest back into our people and our planet. So they are inextricably linked. They are interdependent.
I agree. And we've so often found ourselves in this either-or thinking. I can either maximise profits or I can treat my people well.
Yeah.
Well, no, actually, if you treat your people well, you're very likely to find that they will contribute much more and you'll make more profit. I can maximise profits or I can honour my responsibilities to the world that I touch externally. Well, no, actually, again, people will feel good to be involved in an organisation that's making a positive difference and much less for one that isn't.
Or I might just put a little bit into the planet. I might do a little bit of sustainability work, but I've got to transact that with my people. And how much am I going to spend on my people, or how much am I going to transact on sustainability? It shouldn't be an either or. It should be, how am I integrating? And integration, I think, integral is a great word we can think about for the future. You know, the integral leader, there's a lot about integral leadership, but it's an integral world now that we're living in. It
absolutely is. Completely is. And I've been very influenced by Ken Wilber, a great integral thinker, and his model and approach here. It's one world. Try denying it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Look, it's one world. Here we are, trying denying that we're not here. As you mentioned earlier, I was in China last week. I was struck by how it's part of the same world.
With the same issues.
With the same issues.
Same
and
challenges.
people who have the same challenges.
Yeah.
And here we are. Try denying it. We had this myth of competition. I want to highlight this in particular. We say we're competing against. When, where, how?
Why?
Yeah, good, even better. Why? Why are you competing against? What's that about? What is it you're doing? Isn't it, if there's one person to compete against, and I wouldn't even do this, it would be yourself. To do better than you've done. To take that to another level. Do I wish Erika's business well? Absolutely I do. Do I wish your business? Absolutely I do. Every business well. And why not? Do I wish other human beings well? Absolutely. This is not a zero-sum game.
Yeah. Okay, we've got about 2 minutes left. Anything you want to say, either of you or both, in the last 2 minutes?
I think one of the things I always think about, Iain, in the world of leadership at the moment, I think is, we talked about heart-centered leadership earlier, but it's trying to always think about decisions through the lens of compassion. I think these words are not words that businesses often use. They're not words that businesses feel comfortable with. I think compassion and grace are very important words to me. I'm not saying, as Nigel has said, that I would live those every day myself. It is something that I try to do. I look at myself every day in the decisions I make and say, was that as compassionate as I could have been, should have been? But to me, that's, I think, a really important part of the future.
Okay.
I love the grace, because my personal, as much as I can describe a mission, it's to enable people to lead their lives with grace and flow. And I would say everyone can lead themselves and others, and everyone can make a difference, and everyone, as I have done, to some extent, can become more aware and connect. And as I've also stopped doing, we can stop beating ourselves up, stop beating one another up, and lead in a way that makes a difference.
And not forget the stillness, which we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah, that's the recharge. If we don't get still, there's no recharge. Like recharging a battery, there's just none. It's just ground down, 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 down.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. It's been really good. I've really enjoyed this conversation. So
Thank you.
Erika and Nigel, thank you very much, and good luck with your work. You're doing great work.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
very
Iain.
much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Erika.
Thank you, Nigel.
And thank you everyone for, once again, for watching Conscious TV, and I hope we see you again soon. Goodbye.